Shalom. I'm out here just enjoying some of the beautiful creation that's all around us. Shabbat Shalom. I waiting for my dog to show up. She's out bombing around, enjoying being a dog. Haven't been able to get out and walk for the last couple of days because of some chemicals or whatnot that was on top of the water. But I wanted to try to tackle a topic that's incredibly polarized, obviously, especially currently. It's a very inflammatory topic, and I'm going to try to shed some light on it. And so, Father, I just pray you bless me right now to speak in a way that is meaningful to your people. I pray, Father, that you would direct my tongue and that your people would hear and perceive and be blessed, Father, in the truth. In your Son's name I pray. Amen. Zionism. Zionism at face value, when we look at it at face value as how most people would understand it, is this idea that the Jewish people would have a nation, a home, a place for themselves. It leverages and uses the Torah and the Bible, for example, or the Tanakh, the Torah, the Navutim, the prophets, and the Kavutim, the writings, as a mean of justifying the state of Israel's existence. I am somebody that is passionate about a clean and a pure tongue. This is actually the heart of my personal walk, is looking at not modern Hebrew, but biblical Hebrew, understanding its patterns, a lot of its mysteries, what's held within it. But ultimately, I actually rejected the idea of studying Hebrew back when I was first interested in it because of what I saw as the complexity and confusion of the vowel point system, and it didn't resonate with me at all. And I just resigned myself at that point in time. I accepted defeat, so to speak. I didn't go further. I didn't dig further. And I'm at a point in my life that's taken me quite a while to get to, where I have recognized that in many areas of my life I've accepted defeat. And this is not my purpose. This is not our purpose to accept defeat. And this is how falsehood, this is how our enemy is pervasive, not only in our world, but in our lives, in our homes. This is how we usher death into our life, is through acceptance and compromise of that which is false. And so this a lot of people will immediately be dismissive about what I'm about to say, and that's okay. But when we look at having a clean tongue, and in the prophet Zephaniah 3:9, it says that a clean tongue, the Most High will restore a clean tongue on the earth. That's something that I'm passionate about. That's something that I have prayed about, prayed for, prayed on. And it's something that I seek to have established in my own life, in my own speech, in my thoughts, in my speech, and in my action, that my actions would reflect what comes out of my mouth, so that my tongue is clean, my word is good, my word is true. So I want to first, before I get into Zionism, I want to present something, a concept. I want to try to establish a thought process. And this thought process is that we often accept tradition as reality. And through that, we will often accept something that is false or a false construct, and we will accept it as the truth. We will accept it as normal. And I'll explain this by just talking about the word Jewish. So where does the word Jew come from? Well, it comes really from Rome. It comes from the period of Rome, as I understand it, where the southern kingdom, and the land of Israel, which is also an incorrect phonetic transliteration of biblical Hebrew. But I want to focus on the word Jewish right now. That word came from a occupier, the Roman occupier, which we are still under the Roman system of governance, laws, legal system. All this system that is perpetuated in the West is rooted in Rome. Well, the land was called Judea by Rome. And so this is where we get the word Jew, Judea, Jew. And Judite, Jew, Judea. These are different words that were affected by Latin and Rome, as I understand. When we look at the Hebrew word for the southern kingdom and the tribe of the kingship of the kingdom of Israel, the word for that tribe is Yehuda. And that word is actually very special for someone that is passionate about the Hebrew language and language in general, because out of the 12 tribes, there was only one tribe that holds the letters Yud, Hey, Yah, not only at the beginning of the word, Yahuda, but if you look, the word Yehuda itself begins with a Yud, which is like a Y, which sounds like an E or an I, and what's called a Hey, which is like an H. Okay? So that word, Yehuda, is special for someone that is passionate about Hebrew language, because it begins with Yah, and it's contained like a bookend. It begins and ends with the letter Yud and Hey. So it's actually contained in the word Yah as well. Now, when a people, and even though I relate to being of the northern kingdom, or the sons and the tribes, the northern kingdom was called Israel or Israel, but ultimately it's called Ephraim or Ephraim. And that's what I relate to personally, not necessarily being a Yahudim or a Yahudi, but being of the lineage that is related to Joseph, Yusuf, and Ephraim, his youngest son, that was given the inheritance as the bar, or the heir, over his brother Manasseh. So we are so conditioned as a people, and not just the world. I'm speaking to the world, but I'm also speaking to those who consider themselves the seed of Avaraham through Ytsachaq and Ya'akav, okay, commonly called Isaac and Jacob. Why is that important? Because Abraham has other seed as well. He has seed that's considered the Arabic world through Ishmael. He also had a third wife, or a third woman, after Sarah, or mother Sarah, passed away. He had a third wife, and he had children, sons with her, that he sent east as well, which I believe ultimately became the land that we today know as India. And it's interesting because in terms of language, within the Sanskrit language, as I understand, as I've heard, and I'm not an expert on Sanskrit at all, but what I have heard is that the word Brahma in Sanskrit is not considered is not considered, what's the right word, indigenous to the language. It's considered a foreign word within Sanskrit. When we look at that word, Brahma, it is very similar phonetically for someone that is concerned with phonetics and linguists and believes that these things are rooted, that when there was confusion of the tongues of the nations, that some of the Hebrew is actually encoded and preserved across these different languages in the 70 nations. But that word Brahma is very close and very similar phonetically to Avaraham, Brahma, but Abram. And in languages, our fathers were very instrumental in, for example, naming of our cities, and our cultures were largely remembered, and our fathers were largely recognized in the culture and in the language of different civilizations all around the world. So what I'm getting at is how we as a people can accept and be conditioned to accept something that's really false, where we accept, for example, our occupiers' language. We accept our occupiers' way of life. You can see this in America, where Native Indigenous Americans were forced to cut their hair, forced to give up their way of life and come and integrate and be part of public school system. They were largely forced to accept the lifestyle of their occupier. And this is typical within imperialism. And it's really uniform. It's not necessarily limited to one culture. It's pretty uniform even across, cultures. Even within the Kingdom of Israel, you had to conform and become Torah observant, because the law in Israel requires not just the natural born to observe it, but also the sojourner. And the sojourner would include those that would be considered slaves or servants of a house. Now, when we talk about slavery, yes, Israel, so to speak, in the common tongue, had slaves. But the difference about Israel and the rest of the world is how we treated, or how we are told, commanded, instructed to treat those that would be called slaves. They were to be treated on the same level as the master would treat himself. So if you don't feed your food, or if you don't feed your slaves or your servants the same food that you eat, if they don't have the same kind of conditions, the same kind of bed that you sleep on, at least in Jewish tradition, you would not be living properly. There is within the law itself, the Torah, instructions on how we are to keep slaves, how we are to treat slaves. But the important thing to understand and distinguish is that a slave in Israel is not the same thing, for example, as a slave when we look at the African Americans that were slaves in America. That kind of a treatment of a person would be completely unlawful in the Torah. People would have a choice to bind themselves to a slave master's house, meaning the master, meaning the not the taskmaster like we think of these people on plantations, but the person, the head of the house. And the sign for that would be that they would take their ear and they would put they would pierce the ear on the head of the house is on his door mantle, or his door frame, so to speak. I forget the actual word for it. And so you would be, by doing that, you would be binding yourself to your master, to his house forever. And what comes to my mind right now is in common tongue, Eliezer, who was the right hand of Abraham. And if Abraham had not blessed with a son, then his right hand, would have ultimately become the heir of his house in most cases. So there's context. And what I'm trying to communicate right now is if people have the patience to get through this, I'm trying to weave a tapestry that gives context. And the context that I'm trying to communicate is that we, as people globally, have accepted false ideas as truth or as our reality. As soon as that happens, we are compromised. We are compromised because we're living in a false construct. And when you live in a false construct, you're subject to the falsehood, and falsehood is the root of all death. Death in relationships, death in your body, death in financially, death in a nation. It's all falsehood. You cannot have any healthy relationship where falsehood is allowed to sit at that table. So if we are willing as a people to accept the language of our occupier, of our oppressor, and that make their language our own, rather than staying and insisting upon and maintaining a pure tongue, we are integrating and becoming part of the society, the structure, the system of the oppressor. And this is largely in spiritual terms called Babylon. Babylon is not even an accurate Hebrew word. In Hebrew, that word is Baval. Some might say Babal. And this is the root of the word in English, Babel. It means the same exact thing. It's confusion, it's mixing, it's a confused tongue. It's when your tongue gets babbled up, blah, 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 you don't speak right. And that's exactly what modern Hebrew is. It's Babel. Modern Hebrew takes sounds and allows them to be shared with multiple letters, usurping the real structure and foundation of that language and of that tongue, so that you cannot really discern it outside of rote memorization. And whenever you're having rote memorization, you're just memorizing something. You're memorizing it at face value. You're not necessarily comprehending and understanding what's going on. You're recognizing something at face value in its association. It's not necessarily understanding. It's a form of knowledge, but it doesn't imply understanding and the other aspects, deeper knowledge. Where does knowledge go? Well, knowledge by itself doesn't mean too much. You need to have understanding of that knowledge, and then when you have understanding, you need to apply it and have wisdom. That's when knowledge brings life, is when you have understanding and it's applied to wisdom. So, with that said, what is Zionism really? We think of and have accepted Zionism in some senses to be this idea that what we understand as a people that we typically call Jews, Jewish people have the right to have their own homeland. And this homeland is theirs because it's been established in the Bible, and there's a contract between Abraham and the Most High, the Almighty. And it says that this land will be given to you and your seed forever. And we know that that land was called Canaan, commonly called Canaan. And we also know that the people that were called the Canaanites, or Canaanim, that these were children of one of three sons of Noah, Sham, Ham, and Ephah, commonly called Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Okay, these were the three sons of Noah that were divided and given land apportionately. They were given that as their inheritance. It was a legal contract, and it was to be their land forever. Well, what happened historically is that it says in the writings, and I'm going to give you some information, and I encourage you to do your own research. I'm not here to do your work for you. I'm here to plant a seed right now for refinement, for truth, and for understanding, and to try to bring some clarity, or at least give a foundation so that people, if they have any ear to hear and they're willing to listen, they can begin to discern and separate the truth from the falsehood. That's what this is about. This is about how do we have discernment, and how do we take on some of these really difficult issues and make sense of them in the world today. So it says in the writings that Ephah didn't like his inheritance, that it was too cold, and he ultimately pitched his tents among his brothers. So that means that the children of Ephah, which are detailed by generations in the writings, that they intermingled with their brothers Ham and Sham. We also know that some of those children, specifically Ka'anim, the children of Canaan, that they settled in land that was not their own. And that the children of that man were ultimately cursed to be servants to their other brothers, okay? Now, historically what happened in the land was those people not only lived in land that was not theirs, they began to practice abominations. They were engaged in idol worship. They intermingled with children that were considered offspring of fallen angels, the Nephilim, the giants, the Raphamim. These were intermingled in the land of Canaan when the children of Israel came out of Matzarim, or Egypt. And because of the fact that they had broken the contract of their fathers and taken land and occupied land that was not their own, and had polluted that land through abomination of basically witchcraft, demon worship, sacrificing humans, drinking, eating blood, engaging in all kinds of sexual immorality. But they were literally offering their children as sacrifices. And because of that, when Israel, commonly Israel, was brought out of Matzarim, or Egypt, they were commanded to wipe this people out, to completely eliminate them from the land. That was the judgment that was upon them for the abominations, that they were defiling the land. When we go against life, when we bring not just lawlessness, which is evil, but when we bring abominations into the land, and we live as in the divine image in a way that's considered an abomination to the Creator, whose image we are made in, and that we are expected to honor in this kingdom as stewards of this kingdom, that's called abomination, and it's called defiling of the land. So these people were told to be wiped out of each and every territory that was then given to these 12 tribes that were actually 14 tribes, because it says in Bereshith, or Genesis, that Ya'akav, he actually adopted Manasseh and Ephraim as Reuben and Simon. Reuven is Shimon. So it doesn't say that he that there was one more tribe that Ephraim, received Joseph's house as the bar of Joseph's house. It says that Yaakov literally adopted them. He took them as his own. He claimed them as his own, as his first and second born sons. So when we don't give things proper context, we will ultimately fall from the truth, and we will be entering into a ideology, an understanding that is rooted and built upon confusion. And the author of confusion is not the Elohim. Elohim is the author of order, structure, and truth. The author of confusion is our enemy, the adversary. So with that said, I know that was 24 minutes to actually get into what I want to talk about, which is actually Zionism. Zionism itself is not even properly transliterated from Hebrew into English. The mountain that is called Siyun in Hebrew, is actually not a Zion, which is the Z, but a Sadi. The Sadi is like a TS or an X, if we were to translate it to English. We use English letters to communicate or convey. That's what transliteration is, in case you don't know. Transliteration is when you take a Hebrew letter or character and you match it with the best, the letter from the English alphabet, which literally comes from Aleph, Beef, in Hebrew, deviated a little bit from Greek because Greek used their letter, they called it an alpha. And so you have this word Aleph, alpha, being contrived in our alphabet. But the alphabet is 26 letters that when you eliminate the redundant sounds, the sounds that are duplicated, you are left with 22 letters, just like the Hebrew Aleph, Beef. And if you were going to properly transliterate Zionism into English, it would actually be T-S-Y. Some could say an E or an I, but really Y, because it captures both the E and the I. U-N, Sion, okay? Not Zion. Zion, and so Zion would be a completely different spelling altogether, but it would start with a Zadi, which is a Z. Now, some people might just think that this is trivial details, and they will just write me off on this. But the reality that I've learned to recognize is that our realm is a reflection of spiritual reality, and that the spiritual reality is the unseen, and the physical is the manifest that reflects that truth, that reality that is unseen. But this realm that we're in is a manifestation of the spiritual reality, of spiritual order, of spiritual structure, and ultimately of our Creator. I'm looking around because I'm concerned that my dog hasn't come back yet. But talking about Zionism, okay, the idea itself that the Jewish people, commonly spoken, have a homeland is not a bad idea at all. That is a good idea. You know, all people on earth should have a land that's called their own. And what we've been seeing now across the world, that this globalist experiment of open borders and mixing people to try to create this basically conglomeration of just bodies, it doesn't work, okay? It doesn't work, and that doesn't mean that people can't coexist, but the fact that we have different cultures and identities and languages and practices, those aren't necessarily bad things. A lot of times our culture, our language, our practices are reflections of the natural environments that we live in. If you are a desert dweller, you're going to have a lifestyle and a tongue that reflects where you live. If you live in a rainforest, you're going to have a language and a tongue and a life that reflects living in a rainforest. So if you take people that are used to living in a rainforest and you go put them in a city, which is unnatural for all of us, we're not meant to be living in cities. Like, that is actually not how we're meant to live. We're meant to live on the land and be integrated with the land, to know our environment and to be part of our environment. The city life is not a life that's conducive ultimately to a natural life. City life puts people on top of each other. It creates pollution, noise pollution, light pollution, pollution of human waste, garbage. All these things are much more difficult to deal with when you stack people and bodies on top of each other and go vertical. People need space. People need land. When you're a person or a family and you have enough land to deal with your natural waste, that natural waste ultimately becomes fertilizer in the land. It's not a problem. It doesn't create disease. You don't have to worry about eliminating 175 million or 200 million gallons of raw sewage from Los Angeles into the ocean, because you're out in the land and you bury your waste and you process your waste in a way, just like animals do, that's conducive to the land. And when you're eating clean, human waste doesn't become as contaminated and as a disease generator as it does when you're eating that which is unclean, contaminated, and literally not designed for human consumption. So Zionism, the idea that the Jewish people, as we have come to understand them, even though I've talked about how that's a false construct, that idea is a good idea. However, what most people do not realize or understand is that the land that we commonly call Israel is sacred land, okay? That land is bound by a covenant with the Creator that is unique, that covenant does not exist anywhere else on the world. That land is not dedicated and bound to the seed of not just one man, but three men, because also in the law, for example, if you were to convert and become part of Israel, you are not really fully integrated until the third generation. And we know that because you're not welcome into the inner court of the temple outside of the third generation as a convert. And this is a reflection of order and establishment, that to really be fully established in something, and this is the case also with the covenant of Yahuwah, that it requires three generations. And we see this because we see that Abraham himself was not called, quote unquote, Israel. Isaac was not called Israel. It was not until the third generation, until three of these men walked in accordance with the ways of the way of the Almighty, until they received this name, Israel, which I would offer in ancient Hebrew is better said Ishar'el, which is to do the straightness of Yah, to do uprightness, Yah's uprightness. It does not mean to wrestle with Elohim. Jacob wrestled with Elohim, so to speak, or a messenger of Elohim, and then was touched on his hip. And when he was touched on his hip, he walked with a straight leg, okay? It caused him to have a limp, okay? And that straight leg is an innuendo or a sign or a symbol of the straightness that we need to do and walk in as men before our Creator. So the idea of these people having their land is a good idea. I consider myself certainly part of those people, but I'm in exile. And the prophecy that the Most High will bring his people back from the four corners of the earth, so to speak, has not been fulfilled. Men who have recreated a situation that mirrors this promise have fooled the world into thinking that Israel, the kingdom of Israel, is restored and now exists. But that's not what we have happening today. We have a state that was established effectively by the English government through the Balfour Declaration with the Rothschilds, who, as I understand it, are Khazarians and are not of the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you have a false image of something, just like the word Jew, which is a false image of Yahudah. Judah is not the same as Yahudah. And so you have this false image being reflected not only in the tongue, but in reality. And that's pretty profound, because reality is all formed by sound and the tongue. Our whole matrix is established by sound and speech, by the word of Yah, literally sound. Everything is a vibration. Everything has form and function through vibration. So I know I'm going pretty deep on this, and it's probably deeper than most people have patience for to even sit through and hear me out. And maybe I'll be able to simplify it as I refine my own communication as well. But I'm talking to a specific person who is a truth seeker. I'm talking to a person that has the patience to dig deep. That's the person that I'm talking to. I'm not talking to a person who's looking for sound bites and is going to just latch onto an idea and accept it. okay? Most people that are in Christianity believe and are being manipulated that because of the promise to Abraham, that those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. So most people that are coming from Christianity, which is apostate itself, it's not walking in the truth itself, and we can see that just in the simple fact that they don't even honor Sabbath, which is one of the 10 commands, okay? So that's completely an apostate religion. So is Catholicism, and ultimately so is Judaism. And these are things I can prove and establish just by using his word, not my own, okay? And I would challenge anybody to take what I'm saying and go actually look at the Hebrew, read the actual covenant, and tell me that I'm saying or speaking anything that's false. The problem that we have with Zionism is that it ignores the covenant that is established by the Almighty on the land itself, okay? 35 minutes and it's into it. If you got this far, this is the key. This is the key. If you go into the Torah, for example, into the book of Davarim, which is the words, the directions, the instructions, that it's like when he speaks and gives a direction, Davarim is the words, okay? It's transliterated or translated, commonly called Deuteronomy in English. But if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, it gives about 14 verses of blessings, which is also equal to the 14 tribes, also equal to the number of David, which in Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, is actually Dude. Dude Malak, Malak Dude, that's his name. And his name is equal to 14. It's a 6, it's a 4 attached to a 6 attached to a 4, okay? So it's literally in the ancient text, it's like two triangles attached to one another. Those triangles represent doorways. That's where we get what's called the Shield of David, the Magen David. That's where you get the Star of David, so to speak, which is also used in occult symbolism because of the numerical references, like the fact that it has 6 points, 6 different, you can ultimately derive 666 from that shape as well. So anything that's good, like a rainbow, can be twisted and hijacked by evil. And that's what we see in the tongue and in ideology as well. So the idea of the people or the kingdom, the children of Abraham, having their own land is a good idea. Here she is. Wow, you were gone a long time. That's a great idea. So let me be clear. In that sense, I look for and longed for the day that his people are truly established in the land. But when you get into the word, his word, he says that he is going to gather his people from among the nations, from the four corners of the earth, and he will bring them into the land, okay? It's not going to be just one tribe, which is Yehuda, okay? Today, it's called, effectively, it's like as if they had reestablished the southern kingdom without the northern kingdom. And the southern kingdom was really predominantly two tribes, the tribe of Yehuda and the tribe of Benjamin. The northern kingdom was the other 10 tribes. Well, this is also a pattern of 2 and 10, just like you had 2 brothers that didn't betray each other out of the 12. No, mama, come here. Stay back this way. I got to reel her in. Come on, good girl. So if you recall, Yusuf or Joseph was sold into slavery by his 10 brothers. One of his brothers from his mother, Rachel, had not been born yet. No, don't go there. So when you look at this pattern of 2 and 10, there were only 2 brothers out of 10 that didn't betray their father and sell their brother into slavery, and that was Benjamin and Joseph. When the people were going to go into the land and they wanted to scout it out, they sent 12 princes, 12 chiefs into the land to try to scout it out. Well, 10 of them came back and said, we can't take this land. It's you got giants in it. We're like grasshoppers to them. We can't do it. But there were only 2, Yahushua and Caleb commonly, who said, we can do this. Mama, come on. Okay, only 2 of the 10. So here's that pattern again. Said we can do it. What happened to those other 10 chiefs? They died. They were literally struck dead. They were cursed, and they were struck dead because they had just been brought out of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, had just seen all these miracles, had been through all of these great miracles that the Most High had done for them, and now he is telling them, I want you to go into this land and possess it, it's yours. And they're saying we can't do it. They're denying him. So this is our danger as the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is if we deny him, if we deny our creator, if we deny our Eloheinu, our mighty one. That's the danger. So this is why we have a problem in the land that we call Israel, because the law of that land, no matter who's there, is that land is dedicated to a specific people who were cursed and taken out of it because they broke the covenant, but that covenant still stands. So you cannot go back into that land, claim it, and then ignore the covenant. That's what the modern state of Israel is doing. And so they are ignoring one law for the natural born and one law for the sojourner, which would include people known as Palestinians today. Okay, they would be expected to live under the same law as Israel. But the Orthodox Judaism is a constructed religion that denies that. And deep down, there are people within that construct that would literally even sentence you to death if you tried to observe Sabbath with all of your heart, mind, and soul, but you weren't known as a Jew. Okay? They would literally be okay, or would even sentence you to death themselves. They tell people that if you're not Jewish, you have to break the Sabbath. If you're over celebrating Shabbat or Sabbath at an Orthodox person's house, they'll ask you to turn their lights on and off, or cook something or do something for them to break Sabbath for them, because they can't do it. But what they don't even realize is that if they have you break Sabbath in their house, they're breaking Sabbath also. And they don't know this because they're listening to shepherds, rabbis, who are apostate, just like the Christian church is apostate, because they have added to and taken away from his word. And I have personally sat in a Bible study on a Wednesday night with a Chabad rabbi who literally read Devarim 4:2, that you should not add to or take away from his word. And they literally said, we cannot take away, but we can add to, after reading that to the class. And I sat there stunned. And honestly, I should have spoken up and said something. I didn't, because I was so stunned. And I was just listening to what he was saying. I was stunned that he would literally read the word and contradict it immediately, and do that in a way, and was teaching others that was okay. That is what's called deviating from the straight path to the right or to the left. And I would offer that what has happened is that modern Judaism, a religion, has added to the Torah and therefore is in violation of it. And Christianity has taken away from the Torah and has called it a curse, which is also deviating from the straight path, going to the left. Now, there's a prophet that we commonly know as Ezekiel, or Hezekiah, who was told to go out and take 2 sticks and write on them Ephraim and Yehuda, and bind them together again, and this to walk around with this double staff bound as one, as a sign to the people. That sign was prophetic. What needs to happen is the Christians, who are, I would say, represent largely Joseph, what's called the prodigal son, who left the father's house and went out and squandered their inheritance. This is a parable that was taught by the Messiah, that body is largely representative of the northern kingdom, the 10 lost tribes. Yehuda, the other side of that equation, is the brother that stayed in their family, in the father's house. They didn't leave the Torah, but they didn't have the spirit of brotherly love. And that was evident when they didn't recognize and they didn't recognize and accept Messiah when he came, because he came as a servant, and they wanted a king like King Saul. They didn't learn their lesson from King Shaul, who was this tall, handsome man in appearances and stature, but was not a good king, who became the king that had the heart of Yah? He was a lowly shepherd boy that by many was actually thought of to be potentially a bastard, is common understanding among Torah scholars, because when the prophet of Yah, Shamuel, came and asked Ishai to present his sons, commonly known as Jesse, all of his boys were presented but one. And he said, no, these aren't it. Do you have any more? And he said, oh, we've got one more out in the field taking care of the sheep. Well, go get him. And so they went and got this guy that was out in the sheep doing the lowly work. And he was the one that received the anointing. So we have this paradigm of these two kings. One who had the appearances, it was said that he was like literally like a head taller than the rest of the men, and was beautiful to look at. It was like an act like a world-class athlete and handsome, like a model athlete, right? That's what the heart of this people looks at. They don't see the past, the superficial. This is why Messiah wasn't recognized, because he didn't come in riding on a stallion and a chariot to overthrow the government. He came in humbly on a donkey to serve and to bring healing and to bring truth, but they didn't want truth. They wanted power. They wanted influence. They wanted glory. They wanted money. They wanted pleasure. And this is still the disease that we have today. And we see that when we see all these rabbis in their penguin outfits, their black and white uniform that looks like a mafia, because it is a form of mafia, and they come stand around this President Trump. And no disrespect to the President Trump, he's in a position, and he wouldn't be in that position if he didn't have some kind of anointing of the Most High. Now that anointing can be for good or evil, but it says that our rulers are appointed according to the will of Yah, even whether they're good or bad. So, but for them to surround him and for some to even propose that he's the Messiah, it shows you and it speaks to the condition of the heart of the orthodoxy, that it is truly apostate. It does not recognize the real spirit of the Creator. It has the word, but it doesn't have the spirit. So if I take the word like a religious text that is divinely inspired, but I don't have the correct spirit associated, I'm going to use that word in a destructive way, because it's like a body without a soul. If you take a body without a soul, it's called unclean. Well, so is the Torah without the spirit of truth behind it. If you don't have the spirit of truth behind Torah, you end up with Talmud, the ideologies of men who are literally saying that it's okay if you have intercourse with a young girl before a certain age, that her hymen will grow back, and that's not even, that's not even a crime or a rape. This is abomination. And yes, these are literal things in the Talmud that some will try to say, oh, it's metaphor, or it's this or it's that, but it's evil is what it is. That's what you get when you take out the spirit of the Davarim, of the word. And when you go back to Deuteronomy 28 or Davarim 28, I said there's these 14 verses of blessings for when we walk with him, we honor his word. But when we don't, there's like 60 some verses, 64 I believe, of verses that talk about the curses that we will be subjected to. And this is the problem with Zionism. It ignores the covenant of Yah on the land between Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are called Israel, the kingdom of Israel. And it ignores that. It separates itself from that. And you cannot separate the people of Yah from his covenant. And you cannot separate the land that is called the land of our inheritance from that covenant. You cannot do that. When you do that, you are inviting chaos. You are inviting destruction. You are inviting violence. You are inviting poverty. You are inviting death. That is the curse on the land. And so what is happening today is a false image of the true kingdom of Israel called the state, literally mixed. There are real Yahudim. There are real sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob there. But I would say that they are probably the minority, that the majority of people that are perpetuating to be Jews in the land are actually Ashkenaz who are converts that are of the lineage of Ephath or Japheth, Mama come, not of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, if they were lawful, that would be fine, because you can convert, and in 3 generations, you're fully accepted, you're fully grafted in to the tree that is called the tree of life, the tree that is Israel. But if you are coming in with an imposter religion and imposter practice and teaching falsehood and perpetuating falsehood in the land, you're bringing death into the land. And it's so appropriate that they wear black and that they dress themselves in black, supposedly for humility, to not draw attention to themselves and to dress humbly. But you know what? Who wears black? The person that wears black is the judge and the executioner. Usually the executioner wears the black mask over his face. Black is a sign of darkness. Black is a sign of mourning. When Yusuf was given a coat from his father, he was given a coat of many colors. Joseph was given a coat of many colors by his father, Ya'akav, not a black coat or a cloak, okay? So what we see in Israel today, and I want to say that there are, even within Ashkenazi, obviously there are men that are incredibly dedicated to Torah and trying to live righteously. But aside from the Spirit, I will tell you this: they do not know how to love their brother, and they do not recognize their brother. Just like in Egypt, just like in Mitzrayim, when the 10 didn't recognize Joseph, but he recognized them. That's exactly what we have in the Orthodoxy. Even men who are dedicating themselves to walking and trying to be Torah observant, and they're not really observing Torah, because you can't be in New York City and observe Sukkot or Sukkoth or Passover or Yom Kippur and be an observant Jew. You are told, as a man of accountability, all men 20 years and old, we are told to present ourselves in the city where he has established his name forever, and we know that's Jerusalem. So if you're a quote-unquote observant man, but you're not presenting yourself 3 times a year before Yahuwah in his city, the city that he has put his name forever, you're not an observant Jew. Whether you call yourself a Jew or a Yahudi or Yahudim, you're not observant. And this is the problem. When you're guilty of breaking one, you're guilty of breaking all. And we are living in a state of self-deception, and it is not just the Jew, it is also the Christian, it is also these Torah keepers, of which I'm part of, these men who have come out of Christianity, come out of falsehood, learn, and recognized and actually heard Messiah's voice that said in Matthew 5:17 through 20 that not one punctuation of the Torah will change until heaven and earth, that he didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill. And a lot of people want to say that meant to end it, but no, it meant to do it. And the Apostle Paul, which a lot of people want to criticize because his writing can be confusing and wordy and robust, but he said that Abraham fulfilled the law. So clearly when Abraham fulfilled the law, he did not bring it to an end. And Psalms 19, Mashalai, that's Proverbs, the Psalm Tephilim 19, 7 through 14 says that the law is perfect. It brings light, wisdom to the eyes. So what's happening, and the root problem with Zionism is Zionism has no recognition of the covenant of the land and no recognition of the Most High Yah. And that is why it's broken, and that's why it's going to lead to death and destruction in the land. And that's why we're going to see the fulfillment of the prophecy of the land being judged and cleansed of the lawless. And it says that 2/3, which by the way equals 0.666, are going to be destroyed in Jerusalem and in the land, that the 1/3 that remains will be called holy forever. And then when they're judged by the world, the nations themselves are going to be judged in the same regard, because our Creator is just, and the firstborn son gets judged first, because we were called to be kings and priests, not only to ourselves, but to the nations. And we didn't do that. We didn't do it. It's our disobedience. He didn't depart from us. We departed from him. And he didn't come into the land with us when we went over into the land, but he sent an angel, a messenger, to be appointed, but he didn't go in himself. And it says that we only actually observed the law and his instructions for one generation during the time of Yahushua, who was the disciple, the Talmud of Moses. One generation, that's it, that really kept the law in the land. That's it. That's the problem, guys. That's the root of this. Zionism is bringing curses on the land because Zionism divorces itself from the actual Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Zionism, as a modern construct, the idea of it at face value is a good idea, but what's behind it deeper is death and destruction for the people that are living in the land, but not walking in the way of Yahuwah and not honoring his word, not honoring his commands, his instructions, his statutes, and his voice, his judgments. We have to honor those things or else we are under a curse. And that is exactly what you're seeing today. The curse being fulfilled over the land in terms of the kings that are leading it, the leaders that are leading it, what is being established that are there. And let me tell you something, that government is okay with killing its own people. And it has done that. It has killed its own people. And you cannot make any credible claim that with the sophistication and the technology and the military tactfulness that Israel has as a nation and as a country today, that the response on October 7th to that invasion, whatever you want to call it, that response, you cannot say that Israel defended its people. And when Israel unleashed attack helicopters on its own people, in order to attack these invaders, and were willing to kill their own people along with the invader, that demonstrates right there that those are not men of Yah. Those are not real seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's where I will leave you with this today. We know one another by our fruits, and we know one another by our spirit. 2 witnesses always. 2 witnesses or more is a thing established. And today, if you have an ear to hear, by the way, you got 2 eyes and 2 ears. Both are supposed to be one together. If you see double vision, it doesn't work. If your left ear and your right ear don't hear in synchronization, they don't work. But the eyes and the ears are 2 witnesses to us. And today, we can't trust them. We can't trust them. We can't trust what we see and what we hear. We have to look deeper. We have to look on a spiritual level to have understanding and discernment of what's really happening. And today, if you've heard this message, I hope that you had the patience to hear it out and to accept the seeds of truth that I'm trying to impart in you. And these are not, even though I'm using my words to summarize it and to try to explain it, everything that I'm saying is validated in the actual Torah, the prophets, and the writings, period. And if I'm incorrect or somebody caught me making sometimes I misspeak or you get caught up in a moment, you might not say everything so clear. It's one of the reasons why I prayed about it before, because sometimes I am flawed. I am capable of making mistakes, and I pray for guidance that when I'm speaking or I'm sharing something like this, and I'm trying to encourage and edify people, that it would be in the whole and entire truth. And if I have misspoken, or if I have said something that's in error or incorrect, or you think it's incorrect and you're seeing this, then I challenge you and I ask you, let me know. Tell me when it was that I said it, correct me or bring it to my attention, and I'll look at it and we'll talk about it and we'll discuss it. And I am happy and welcome reproof, correction, and healthy debate. But what I won't engage with is name calling and more. Oh, we got some dogs here. Hello! We got some puppies. Oh, wow. Hey, gentle. Hi, puppies. Hi. What a great way to have an ending. We got some more dogs that just showed up. Awesome. Have a blessed day. Love and respect.